Hello everyone! This game comes as a suggestion from a subscriber. It's quite an interesting game. It was played in Dortmund in 1996 between Gata, Kamsky and Anatoly Karpov. And in 1966, well, Gata Kamsky has always been a strong player, but in 1996 he actually managed to get to the finals of the FIDE World Chess Championship. Okay, Kasparov and Short weren't playing at that time because they were in their PCA or organization, since they had a little argument with FIDE, but nevertheless an extremely strong player at that time already at the age of 22. So this is round one of the tournament in Dortmund, and he faces Karpov. He has the white pieces, and Kamsky opens the game with e4. Karpov plays c6, he goes for the Caro-Kann, d4, d5, knight to d2, d captures, knight captures, this is the main line of the Caro-Kann, and knight to d7. Karpov goes for the Karpov variation of the Caro-Kann. Knight to g5 now, knight to g to f6, and bishop to d3. We have e6, knight 1 to f3, bishop to d6, queen to e2, all standard developing moves. h6, knight to e4, knight captures, queen captures, and now knight to f6. We have queen to h4, and here you can see that Kamsky's plan so far has been these bishops are eyeing the king side. The knight is ready also to join the attack. The queen is already aggressively placed on h4. So Karpov really has to find a plan here. So what options does he have? He can maybe decide to play rook g8, push g5, and create some sort of a attack on the king side himself, but he still doesn't know where Kamsky will castle, and playing something like b6, bishop to b7 might be kind of slow, sorry. So he has to find an idea here, and the move Karpov played here was actually king to e7. And although this looks like a really bizarre move, I really believe this was prepared prior to the game, probably by Geller himself, and then he just suggested it to Karpov. But king to e7 seems to be the strongest move in this position, and at least it's my engine's favorite suggestion. So Karpov played king to e7 here, but let's just see what happens if he castles. Castling here isn't really an option. As we mentioned, these two bishops are aggressively eyeing the king side, so bishop captures on h6 here is an automatic. After g captures, queen captures, you already busted the king side, a bishop for 2 pawns, so that's not really an issue, it's not really even a sacrifice. And black still has problems developing. This knight can't move, there's a checkmate threat on h7, so let's say queen e7, now comes knight e5, you can't capture the knight because after pawn captures, you're not going to be able to move the knight as the checkmate on h7 is still there. So after something like c5, now queen checks, king moves, and now g5 again. g4 threatening g5, this will force the knight out of f6. You can never play a rook to g8 as queen to h6 will follow checkmate after knight blocks to h7. The bishop is covering h7. Again, this will be checkmate. So let's say rook to d8, making some room for the queen, but now queen checks, king moves, and now g5, kicking the knight away. Queen to f8, offering a trade of queens, and also the knight on f6, but after queen to h4, now the knight again can't move because of the threat of checkmate on h7. But it has to move, so blocking checkmate, queen captures, and now queen to g7. Defending checkmate. But now simply g6. Bishop captures knight, and now pawn captures on f7. This is with check. King can go to the h-file. If you capture with the queen, then queen to g5 check, picks up the rook with check. Other idea is king to f8 maybe, but even after king to f8, you simply recapture on e5. You can castle queenside, rook g1 is coming, and black is completely busted. So after king to e7, after this move, castling isn't really an option. So Karpov decided king to e7. So a very nice move. We have knight to e5 by Kamsky, and this is basically offering a pawn, because the knight can be captured, even though d captures on e5 is coming, but it's not like black doesn't have any options here. So Karpov accepts the challenge. He will give up the bishop pair to grab a pawn. We have bishop captures, pawn captures, now pinning the knight, and here we have queen to a5 check. c3 blocking, and now queen captures on e5 with check, and bishop to e3 blocking check. So Karpov is up a pawn, but Kamsky has the bishop pair, and the king is somewhat awkwardly placed on e7. So it's pretty much an equal position. Karpov loves his extra pawn, and Kamsky loves the two bishops for the attack. So b6 by Karpov, we have queenside castle, and now g5. Queen to a4, attacking the c6 pawn, and now c5. Now Karpov will be able to play either bishop to b7 or bishop to d7, depending on what Kamsky plays, and it kind of blocks this dark square bishop here. So a lot of good ideas about c5. Rook h to e1. Now Kamsky is still down a pawn, but he mobilized all of his pieces, and all of them are on very nice squares. Both rooks are occupying the d file, the e file. The bishops are ready to jump into the game. And here Karpov plays bishop to d7, attacking Kamsky's queen. We have queen to a3, and now developing a rook. Rook h to d8. Unfortunately for Kamsky, he doesn't have any good discoveries with this bishop. You can't capture anything because Karpov will simply capture the bishop with the queen. You can play bishop to d2, but this is just silly. You put a bishop on a silly square. So here Kamsky plays g3, now preparing bishop to f4, but Karpov simply moves the queen. Queen c7. So bishop to d4 now. The bishop can't be captured, of course, as the pawn is pinned. The queen is here, the king is on e7. Bishop to e8 now. We have king to b1 and rook to d5 now. f4, rook a to d8. Now Karpov develops all of his pieces. He doubles up rooks on the d file. We have bishop to c2, and now rook 5 to d6. Now this pawn is no longer pinned, and Karpov will be able to capture the bishop. So bishop captures on f6, king captures on f6, and now f captures on g5. We have h captures on g5, and now rook captures on d6. Rook captures and c4, preparing this queen to jump into the game. King back to e7 by Karpov, and now queen to e3, attacking the g5 pawn. f6 defending, and now h4. So Kamsky is still down a pawn, but he manages to create a passed pawn on the queen side, on the king side. G captures, pawn captures, and this passed pawn definitely is compensation enough for being a pawn down. Queen to d7. We have queen to h6 now. e5, pawn to h5. Now Kamsky pushes his passed pawn. As you all know, passed pawns must be pushed. Queen to g4. We have queen to h7 check, king to d8, and h6 now, pushing the passed pawn even further. I forgot to mention, it was on move 33, the first time Kamsky pushed the pawn to h4. It was at that moment that Kamsky actually offered a draw to Karpov, but Karpov declined the draw, saying that the only compensation Kamsky had in the position was actually the bishop pair. Now that he lost that, he still didn't manage to grab a pawn back, so he's down a pawn and he doesn't really have the bishop pair, so there is no reason to take a draw here. And Karpov said that black has better winning chances in that position. It was in the position when h4 was played. So rook to d2, attacking the bishop somewhat, preparing some moves here. And here we have queen to f5, offering a trade of queens. We have queen captures, bishop captures, and here Karpov makes a pretty big mistake. The idea for Karpov is rook to h2, and after h7 is played, that rook will always prevent this pawn from being pushed forward. It will be very hard for Kamsky to make anything of this passed pawn. But this next move Karpov plays bishop to d7 is actually a terrible blunder, and I do want you to pause the video here and find the move that Kamsky missed in the game, because in the game Kamsky didn't take advantage of this terrible blunder. But I'm sure you'll be able to find it, as they were both in pretty big time trouble here. But you know, you can pause the video, you have all the time you like, so feel free to find it. For those of you who did pause the video and who were able to find the move, congratulations, you're a great player. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, the move both Karpov and Kamsky missed was actually king to c1, and king to c1 wins the game. Why does king to c1 win the game? Well, this rook has to protect the bishop on d7, and I will explain why. One idea is that after you play something like rook to d4, then comes bishop to e4, blocking the rook from coming to h4, and now the pawn is coming forward. Rook has to capture, and you simply capture it, and it's a winning position. After bishop attacks rook, you simply prepare to push, bishop blocks, now comes rook to g5, g4, and after bishop moves again, now comes rook check, king moves, and now h7, and there is no defense. Black must capture, and now comes king to g7 check, king moves, and rook captures. So this is completely winning. And on the other hand, after king to c1, if you don't move the rook through the d file, if you play something like rook to h2 immediately going for the pawn, then unfortunately comes rook to d1, and now the bishop on d7 is pinned. So that's why bishop to d7 is a terrible blunder, but fortunately for Karpov and unfortunately for Kamsky, they both missed it. So after bishop to d7 by Karpov, and another thing is you don't really expect Karpov to blunder like this, so he didn't really even look for king to c1. Bishop to g6 was played, here rook to h2, going for that passed pawn. We have h7, king to e7, bishop to d3 now, bishop to e6, rook to g1, we have f5, rook to g7 check, king moves to f6, rook does capture on a7, but now as you can see it's pretty much impossible to promote to this passed pawn, as the rook will be guarding the queening square, that is h8, and this bishop is a light square bishop, so the bishop can't really help with the queening of the pawn. And now Karpov will start pushing his own two passed pawns that are connected. e4, we have bishop to e2, f4 comes now, b3, f3 now, again attacking the bishop, bishop to d1, and now bishop to f5, threatening a discovery here. So king to c1, now comes bishop captures on h7. There was really nothing Kamsky could do here to prevent the loss of this pawn. Rook to b7, now comes king e5, rook captures on b6, and after rook captures on a2, in this position Gata Kamsky resigned the game, and as you can see, there's nothing he can do here. It's very simple. King comes to f4, even if the rook tries to check. Bishop to f5 prevents the check, and then Karpov simply pushes to victory. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, it was a game from round 1, and Karpov started this tournament with a victory. It was an 8-player tournament, and Karpov won this tournament with 5.5 points out of 7. 1 whole point ahead of Vladimir Kramnik. Kramnik was second with 4 points. So a great victory in this game, and a great victory in this tournament for Karpov. Good job on employing that king to e7 move. That was really something in that position. I haven't found out for sure, but I'm guessing Geller found that and prepared it for Karpov. And yeah, a very nice game, especially if you're a Caro-Kann player. I'm very interested if maybe you've employed this idea of king to e7 in your own games. So yeah, I would like to thank Per Svensson for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, probably with another classic. And P.S. I am taking suggestions, what do you want for the 100,000 subscriber giveaway video. See you soon.